I apologize for that little delay. We're not immune from technology issues either. And oh, looks like I even got a typo in here. Um, the Yeah, I had a last minute need to reboot my computer. So apologize for that. Got you all set up here though, and hopefully we will be glitch free for the remainder. So I'm Jeremy Cherney. Thank you for being here. Today we're going to be talking about SharePoint and OneDrive, and you may have used it or heard about it or used something similar like Google Docs or, and Google Drive and things like that. So, just want you guys to kind of think about it today. What can you learn today? What can you discover newly that you have not known about SharePoint? So you come away with something valuable and useful. And of course, your feedback throughout this is great. We've got the chat here if you've got questions. I'll also be available right afterwards for questions. And as Amanda said, you'll get a survey when that comes at the end of the webinar. And please complete that. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you'd like to see in the future. All right, so a little bit just quick background on Microsoft 365. A lot of people have Microsoft 365 and they still mostly use it for email, which is fine, and Outlook, and all that. They still use it for Microsoft Office a lot of times. Maybe they're doing a little bit with Teams, maybe a little bit with OneDrive. I don't know. There's just so many tools that Microsoft has. So today we're just focusing on a couple of the tools, but like anything with, if you know anything about tools, you always want to try and, while you can, you do the use the wrong tool for the job. It's always a little easier to do the right tool for the job. And so today we'll be talking about using SharePoint and OneDrive as those right tools for document management. Uh, so you guys mostly remember, or maybe you're still using the familiar file server and Explorer kind of experience. We've got your files are stored on a server somewhere at your office. You've got them organized or on your computer. You've got them organized by folders, and you use something like Windows Explorer to find your documents. And if you're using, things off a network somewhere in your business, you'll see them show up as your shared drive letters, where everyone puts their common documents. And some of you might even have your own private drive, your own user drive where you can store your documents that nobody else can see except for you. And you're really familiar with this and you've been using this for a long time. And muscle memories are, is a real thing. But I think for me, when it comes to computers, you get used to clicking and doing things a certain way. And you know what? If you want to move to SharePoint because people are talking about it, or maybe you're here to find out about it, but you're going to have some training with your team and you've got some people that just really are not anxious to learn something new. There's another product that we support called Z Drive. We can help you move your documents to SharePoint and OneDrive, but you don't have the same learning curve. Z Drive is something that runs on your computer and it makes your SharePoint and OneDrive look and act like your file server but you still get some of the goodies that come along with SharePoint. But basically for the people that are like, hey, I always use my S drive because that's my shared drive, and I always have my U drive. And I don't want to relearn anything new, but I'd like to put things in SharePoint. Or sometimes you have clients that have documents that reference drive letters and things like that. And so if you're not going to change those documents, that becomes one of those things that becomes an impediment to moving to SharePoint and OneDrive. And this is a way of getting around that as well. So anyway, so if you were here and you're like, hey, I don't really want to move to SharePoint, I kind of know I need to, but I don't really want to learn anything new, you could actually just be done right here. And, we invite you to hang out and learn more about it. But if you're like, oh, this was actually great, I can move to SharePoint and really have things operate the way they did before, you can give us a call if you got a question. But, you could drop off. Because the rest of it's really going to be learning about what SharePoint can do and how to use it for greater effectiveness at work and how you can do things with SharePoint that you can't easily do with your traditional file shares. So where SharePoint and OneDrive, woohoo, it's a nice combination. And we think, when you get used to it, it becomes something that people really like. Now, first of all, kind of what is SharePoint? SharePoint is more than just document storage. And that's important because, it's one technology you can leverage for the documents, but you can do more with it. Not only can you store documents, you can have picture libraries, you can have group calendars or lists of information, common web links you all use. If you have business dashboards, you can incorporate those into your page. This becomes your modern intranet, to use that kind of old school term where people would have a website that you can't get accessed from outside the organization. You can only get it if you're a member of the organization. And they want to put documents, they want to put things like this. And this is a great way to do it because all your security is built in and the permissions are set up for a lot of this, and you can do a lot of it kind of at the out of the box experience that is generally pretty pleasing. And you can make it easy. You can have information that shows up and people can look at it from their phone too. So you get mobility with SharePoint as well. We're going to talk about some of these features, including the search and the AI and documents. But just so you know, SharePoint is a lot more than just documents and storage. A little bit how you get SharePoint and where you can and can't get it. These are the current Microsoft offerings with pricing if you have an annual commitment, and then it's the monthly payment. The so the ones that include file storage and sharing, those are the ones that include SharePoint and OneDrive, unless you're using apps for business, which is OneDrive only. So you don't get SharePoint. So you can use OneDrive, and we'll talk a bit about that, but you don't get the SharePoint document storage, which has some other great features. Um, some of you may not know this, when your renewals come up, and you're interested, if you don't use Microsoft Teams, they do have a version that you know uh, takes away Teams. If you're not using the Teams features, we encourage you to use them because there are some really good things from a productivity standpoint in your business, and some great things from a security perspective. But if you're just like, I am never going to use Microsoft Teams, you can actually pay a little less. So it's another way to save a little bit of money. And Copilot is Microsoft's AI product. We're going to talk a little bit about that because if you add Copilot to any of these other licenses for $30 a month, on top of that, then you get some pretty great AI features. Let's see here. Nope, we're going to start here. So first of all, Microsoft Office has tight integration with SharePoint and OneDrive. The older versions, if you're using something from more than, I don't know, I think pre-Office 2016, if some of you might have that, I don't think there was native support for it. But now, when you use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, they can actually read and write directly to SharePoint and OneDrive, and the dialog boxes that you see show that. So it looks like something like this. So this is I'm in a dialog box, I'm doing a save as copy. If you look what's in this red box, you can see it has my OneDrive. So that's my personal OneDrive folder, but it also has sites, and sites are what SharePoint calls their kind of unit of storage. So you can have SharePoint as a product, and then if you have your intranet set up, that is your SharePoint site. And you can actually have multiple sites for different reasons if you want. But the bottom line is when you see these, it's aware you can actually save and read directly from SharePoint sites by clicking on those and browsing them. Of course, you can save to your local PC and other places, but it's built in, so it's not as much of a problem as it used to be back in the day if you were an early adopter on that. So what else do you get? So there's some new things you get with SharePoint if you're used to your traditional file server that you get, and there's some pretty great things that these alone could be worth maybe the work it takes to learn SharePoint and move over it and all that. One is called co-authoring, right? If you've been working on the file server, you are probably used to seeing you try and open up a document that someone else has open and it says it's read only. You can't open it. And maybe that person left for the day or left for the weekend or something. And we all know what a frustrating experience that can be. Sometimes we're the ones that left it open. Once you put your documents up in Microsoft SharePoint, you can enable it, or it automatically enables a feature called co-authoring. What that means is you can be in the documents at the same time. There's no more read-only files unless that's something you actually want to enable. By default, people can be in these documents at the same time. And you can watch real-time changes. So if you're in it and other people are making changes, which is great, if you're like me and you're last minute, trying to get things done on a document for a meeting that other people are going to be in, it's great to be able to be in it and make those changes. If you're working in a meeting together and you're working on a document, you can actually collaborate together. And you can do this from any device. So you can be in the web browser, you can be in the full version of Microsoft Office, you can be running it from your phone or a tablet, from a Mac, and still get these features. So it's great. And you also get this commenting feature. So instead of like emailing files back and forth, you can actually leverage some of the features here to work on the documents together. So that's really a great feature right there for a lot of people. It's just that you can avoid that read-only files. Let's see, versioning. How do you do versioning now with your documents? You might save a copy and create I do that still sometimes out of habit. I'll create a copy and, change the date in the file name or give it some version number that I put in the file name, and I'll copy one, copy two, things like that, or create a folder for different versions, sort it by date or year, things like that. One of the things you get with SharePoint is built-in versioning. So what that means is when you save a document, every time you save it in the background without you having to do anything, SharePoint creates kind of a little checkpoint, and it knows what that document looked like from the last time you saved it. And the benefit of that is you don't have to make copies and create your own little versioning. It's just built in. If you ever mess up and you like forgot to create a copy, you could actually go back in the version history and restore those files. And you can also control document usage. So you can also do things with versioning where, let's say you've got in your SharePoint, you're using it to put your policy handbook. So you want your policy handbook to be available to people, so you make that available. But in the meantime, maybe you're working on the next version of it. What you can do is you can say, I only want to show this particular version that's approved. And while I'm working on these other versions, those aren't approved yet. No one can see those except you. And then when you finally approve them, then suddenly everyone gets to see it. So it's kind of a little bit of a geeky feature, but it's a really handy feature. Like I said, you just right click on these documents or go into the version history and the couple different places inside of depending on which way you're accessing those documents, but you'll be able to see and use this stuff. So it's really handy. Let's see, versioning. That is that. Couple questions about when you get it. How much storage do you get? A lot of our clients, if they haven't already moved to the cloud, they're considering moving to the cloud, and they've got documents. Some of them have, a few 100,000 documents or millions of documents. They've got documents of different sizes and lots of storage. And some of you have a lot of documents sitting out there. Some of it's all current stuff you need. Some of it's legacy stuff you don't really need, but you haven't cleaned up in a bit. But fundamentally, what you get is you get a pooled storage for your whole SharePoint tenant of 1 TB plus 10 GB per user. So if you have 20 users, you get 1.2 TB of storage shared across your tenant. There are ways you can buy more storage for that. The OneDrive storage in itself, every user gets 1 TB of storage. But if you share any of that, that's what's called pooled storage, and that all applies at the tenant level. So Microsoft doesn't let you leverage all that OneDrive storage. Once you start sharing it, it becomes what's called pooled storage, and you get still what is the total for the tenant, which is going to be that 1.2 TB if you follow that formula from before. So bottom line is, you may need to buy more storage, and they do have it available. You may want to clean up your storage before you move things to SharePoint. Now's maybe the time to finally clean out that attic, because part of the conversation of when you're moving from a server often is the upgrade cost of a new server, adding more storage to the server because you're running out of storage. Well, the same thing can happen in the cloud. I mean, you're not necessarily going to run out of storage, but you'll immediately have to pay for more if you want to use it. So that's how they work with that. Let's take a look. Uh, what are you guys doing for cloud storage now? Let's do a little survey here. How are you doing storage now? Should go ahead and respond. Give you a moment to take a look. Are you using SharePoint, Dropbox, ShareFile? Is that up there? So many different versions. Yep, there it is. There's so many different versions. Some of them you use because they've got certain features, like they're secure, they're compliant, they allow you to share documents with people. Nobody's using Google Drive. No one's using flash drives to share. Well, that's good. Some people are using VPN still. All right, these are the results. So some of you are using SharePoint, a good amount of you are using OneDrive, some are still using Dropbox and VPN. So a lot of you will get some value for today. Thank you. SharePoint has a recycle bin. What do you do with your documents? You got to manage your documents, you delete things, what happens there. So here's Microsoft, the way it works. There's a little more nuance to it. That'd be a much longer slide. It's already kind of dense, but trying to give you a sense for how it works. So once you delete something from SharePoint, it goes into the SharePoint recycle bin and it stays there for 93 days. And after 93 days, uh, if you once anything that you add is older than that, it'll start to remove those things when it gets filled up. Or if you manually delete things, there's a quota size for the recycle bin. And once you exceed the quota, even if you have things that are within the 93-day window, it will start to remove older things to make space for the newer things in the recycle bin. And then after the 93 days, there's one other backup that Microsoft provides for up to 14 days before they're actually deleted. Now, what you want to know is, though, Microsoft can't just delete individual files. I mean, they could, but they don't. What they really do is if they have to back up everything or restore it, rather, it's the whole site. So it becomes a bit of a challenge to restore the site and um, reconciling file changes or things. So there are third-party backup archiving tools. We offer one that goes out to Microsoft and backs up your SharePoint and OneDrive data 3 times a day. It's in a separate cloud, which is also good for best practice. And it's also nice for archiving when if people leave the organization, you can get at their data. And it's also good for the 3-2-1 backup best practice, which is another backup outside of Microsoft. So if you're interested in that or have a compliance need for that, it's great. Much more granular. It also does the same thing for emails and contact entries and calendar entries. So if you deleted something like that, we could actually restore an individual entry or an individual document. Another thing you get, how do you share documents now with people? You save them as a PDF and email them. You email them as the document format they are. Some of you are using Dropbox, things like that. You actually can share these just as you share, if you're familiar with how Google shares things and you get a link to a Google document, you can do the same thing with OneDrive and SharePoint. And you can share those internally as links, which is nice because they kind of reference the document rather than being the document, which is nice. You always know you have the current version. You can control permissions when you share them. So if you want to share something internally inside your organization, you can say, or externally, because you can do both if you want. You can say, can this person just view the document or can they actually edit the document? So you could, if you leverage the guest access, you could share documents with other people outside your organization that you collaborate with, their partners or clients or, whomever. And you're sharing the link to the document instead of sending stuff by email, and then it's like, which email has the current one? You don't have as many copies floating around, so you're not going to get, the old version if you're sharing the link. And it becomes that single source of truth, which is something a lot of people want in their lives. And at work, it's just there's always so much information everywhere, and it's, these documents can show up in so many different ways, through email and Teams and other ways that just knowing you can get right to the link is handy. So, and all you do is you click the share button and you'll get a little window that pops up like that. And it will, whoops, where am I? Got lost, 1 sec, please. Great. Sorry about that. Just looking for one thing I was missing. So yeah, so it's a really nice thing. You can share. I mean, a lot of people are pretty used to sharing things on their phone. They share photos and things like that. You click that little share link, you've got that, and then you can share it via with a link. It'll, you can also share it with Outlook as a link, or you can share with Outlook as a copy if you want. Doesn't get you that single source of truth, but it gives you different ways to do that. So that's another great feature you get with if you go with SharePoint. If you put your documents up, there's the ability to share documents with people, and even they can collaborate on them if you set up that way. So you can be editing it and working on it at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about the security around this. Tobin Solutions, security first is right in our uh, vision, mission, and values. And so we want to make sure you understand what your risks are with this, because people always wonder, once I put data up in the cloud, what am I responsible for? Can I count on my provider like Microsoft to do things? Well, Microsoft makes it really clear, because this is a graphic right out of their documentation on what you're responsible for versus what they're responsible for. So if you're doing SaaS, which is that software as a service, which is what SharePoint is, the SharePoint Online, you're responsible for your information and data, your devices, your accounts and identities, and to some extent, your identity and directory infrastructure, which means you're responsible for your data, your endpoints, your accounts, and your access management. So whatever you do around this, if you accidentally share something with the wrong person, if you don't manage the accounts, if data gets spread out on devices you weren't managing, that's something that you're responsible for. Additionally, we're going to be talking about Microsoft and AI. They have an AI shared responsibility model. So if you're using AI, they're a SaaS product, which is called Copilot. This is what you're responsible for: user training and accountability, usage policy and admin controls, identity, device and access management, and data governance. Those are kind of shared between, but it's shared. So you want to know what you're doing versus what Microsoft's doing. Same thing if you're doing any plugins or data connections to AI. There's a shared responsibility there. After that, Microsoft's responsible. But if you're using ChatGPT, which would be the bring your own model, that is, you're responsible for everything as part of that. Microsoft has very little responsibility other than potentially the AI compute infrastructure and how that's used. By the way, Microsoft does support other AI solutions besides Copilot. Using Azure AI, you can use different models and things like that. And with that greater power comes greater responsibility, as you can see. But for today's demo and that or for today's presentation, we're going to be talking about Copilot. Um, so we talked about whose responsibility is. So how do you do things? What kind of power do you have? Now, depending, some of these settings are really only set up for the administrators of your systems, but you can see under sharing in this on the picture to the left, you can see You've got SharePoint and OneDrive, and you have a slider bar. How do you want these set from the most permissive down to the least permissive of anyone can share files, you know, and anyone with those links can open them? That would be the easiest, but also they don't require sign-in. That would also be one of the least secure ways of doing that. Someone could accidentally share something important. New and existing guests, they have to sign in or provide a verification code. So that would be verifying that they're them. Existing guests, those would be ones that you set up. So you could declare who your existing guests are, maybe clients or partners, and put their emails into the system, and then those can be available to be shared. Or only people inside your organization, which is the most secure, but then it has you don't get any external sharing. Then you'd be copying files or doing some other method. And then you get some other further granular things about what you can do with file and folder links, and specifically the permissions. You can actually have things set to expire after you share them. And you can set that even being a default. Like if they share an anyone link, they're going to expire after 24 hours or 48 hours, or maybe they can give view edit, view file, but they can never give edit, something like that. So you can set those globally. You can set them by site. You can also restrict them by security group in some cases. So you can say, hey, only these people can do it, can send documents and that, share those. And you can do something that's kind of neat. You can restrict by domain. Like maybe you do want people to be able to share with your business clients, which most of them are going to have a business domain. But you could say, hey, you can't share a document to a Gmail account, for example. You could say no Gmail accounts are allowed to receive any sharing requests. And that could be useful if you think, hey, anyone that's using a Gmail account is probably a personal user that we don't want to be able to share, or maybe a hacker or something like that. So, that's kind of another way you can lock down security. So once you get into it, you can do everything through a web browser if you want. You can log in at office.com, log in with your Microsoft credentials, and you can see all your documents in the web browser. You can search across everything. You can see your files. You can launch the files. I mean, you can do a lot with the web browser, but it's not everything, and not all the features that are in the web browser are available in the desktop version. So a lot of times people do both, but it depends on your use case. You may have some people that are frontline workers, people that aren't traditionally having a desktop or laptop with them. They might have a phone or a tablet, and you just want them to jump in and be able to see things and open up documents to view them. It's actually a really handy way to do it. So that's something you get with this as well. That also means you don't need your VPN if you're signing in. It uses your Microsoft security, and you can get access to what you need. Once you get in, what does it look like? Well, I showed you the Windows Explorer view before with the files and folders and all of that. Well, you get kind of a similar view. You can see you've got in the middle here under Documents, you can see it's got folders and different files and dates and modified, and it's pretty standard like what you would expect. Um, you get a few things at the top. You've got the search box that you can search the library. By the way, everything in SharePoint, since it's all web-based, means it's a web link, which means you can use those web links to documents just like you do favorites in your web browser to save sites you go to. You can save documents as favorites and click and go right to them in the web browser. So if you want to upload documents, you would click on the new button to create things. You can create what are called document libraries. By default, you get one document library. We'll talk a bit more about that, but it looks pretty similar. But there's a few other things you get on here that we're going to talk about. One of this filters and views. So you can filter your view. You can say, just show me documents that are within a certain time period, or just show me documents that meet other selection criteria, like who created it, or the type of file. But you can also create files based on what's in the document name and other things. You can get very granular and create some really cool filters to quickly find the documents you want. You also get this new button, sync button. And the sync button is going to allow you, if you're in a folder, to sync that folder down to OneDrive. So when you click that, it's going to fire up OneDrive and use the OneDrive app to sync this folder down to your PC, which is helpful if you are got big documents and you want to have them local, or you're going to be offline from the internet and you need to work on documents, you can do that. And this other one, this add column here, actually lets you add data to your files. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So you've got kind of a traditional Explorer view, but you've got some new features that are really make this powerful. When you have a SharePoint site, you get what's called you get the default document library. So every SharePoint site, by and large, has a document library. You get that one document library, and that is where all the documents get stored inside that SharePoint site. That becomes your shared drive, whatever you're going to do, and all of that. That document library, it's a secure place. You know, the files there are stored encrypted at rest. They are and in transit. They are, you can set up access on them based on the people in your organization. So you can say who has access to those document libraries and who doesn't have access and what kind of access they have. You can even add additional document libraries. You know, you could create a document library for marketing and a document library for the leadership team and a document library for sales team and operations and so forth. Anything you want. And what's nifty there is you can set the security at the document level, at the document library level, and that's a then everything under that library then they would have access to as you set it up. So there's an opportunity as you're moving things to SharePoint if you want. You know, you can just dump it all. If you want, you can just say, hey, we've just got this drive and just bring it all up as is. If it fits and there aren't any other potential incompatibilities, you can just do that. But it's also an enormous opportunity to kind of clean up some of these things, kind of rethink security a little bit, because there might be some things that you've been wanting to do or had some things you've been thinking about as an issue. So those are some of the features there. This add column is a sweet feature. And I don't think a lot of people use this. They're using SharePoint and they're still kind of managing names and stuff the old school way. You know, I showed you this before. You got this add column item to the right, to the far right of the columns inside of this view of your documents. When you do that, it brings up what? It brings up a thing. You can actually create a column. So it's not editing your document, but what it's doing is all of your documents, when they get put into SharePoint, are stored in what's called a document list. And that list, like almost like a table in a spreadsheet, you can add a new column and it goes with the list. So it's a really cool way to further define your documents. Like you could say, with every document, maybe you've got a list of clients. And so instead of creating a folder for the client, you create a column with the client name. And now whenever you can quickly filter on the document list by just showing the items that have matched that client name. You could put in other things like text fields. You can have multiple selections of, is this a project? You can have project numbers. You can have programming behind it. There's so many things you can do to kind of really add a lot of juice to those documents to create a really powerful document management system where you're not just leveraging what's inside the document, but you're making it really easy to find and manage and search out those documents, or add other kind of meta information to the document without actually editing the document. Like you could say this document's approved, or the last date this document was approved by somebody. And you can, whatever you want in there, you can put in. So it's really cool. There's a lot of columns you can put in, and then they're all things that you can filter on. Another thing you get with built in with SharePoint is it leverages another feature of your Microsoft subscription, which is called Power Apps. In the background, you get these things called approval workflows. So maybe you've got documents and you're saying, hey, we got this problem. Every time we push a document, we need people to know that this has been approved. How do I know that? How do I manage that so that it's out there? You can actually do an approval workflow. You can have it set up where if a document gets posted before it's marked as the current version, somebody has to approve it. You could set up approval workflows using SharePoint, and a document, and that document could be a proposal. Here's our proposal, and the your associate put it together, and now the sales manager needs to review it before it goes out. You could actually have a workflow that after the sales associate puts it together, it automatically alerts the sales manager that there's a document for them to approve, and which they can do from their computer or from their phone or from wherever they're at. You can get alerts. Maybe you have a folder and you want to get notified every time there's a new document in that folder, or you've got a repository of other information. You want to know about things like that. So there's so many other things you can do in terms of the business process for workflow and automation. So this could be a great conversation to have with us if you want us to help kind of walk you through some of these things. We can help evaluate how you're doing some of your business processes and help automate some of that. We recently added a data analyst to our team that can help with these kinds of, workflows and integrations and reporting and other legacy systems that you might have, dashboards, taking your data and putting them into dashboards that you can see right from. We can take data out of your business management system that's your legacy system that you don't like the reporting, or the reporting isn't really accessible. We can take that and get that into a dashboard into SharePoint so people can see it. The right people can see it. So that's another great feature of SharePoint. So that's another thing you get. SharePoint is the native storage for Microsoft Teams. Some of you might be putting documents into Teams. Teams itself doesn't actually store the documents inside of Teams. It actually stores them in SharePoint. So that's kind of a nice thing, is if you're using Microsoft Teams and you've already got this SharePoint site set up where you've got documents, you can actually bring those into Teams and make them accessible. Because, there's some people that are, they kind of live in Teams, depending on what you do. They're in there chatting all day long, they're having conferences, and they want to be able to see the documents all in the same place. This is also great for those frontline workers I mentioned, the people that might be in the warehouse or out on the road a lot, and they just have a phone or tablet. They could put Teams on their phone or tablet, and then they can see these documents right from within Teams. And you can chat about them and use them and update them, and you can even edit them inside of Teams it's not for basic editing. So you've got that. Another great feature that comes with SharePoint and OneDrive once you bring things into the cloud. So one of the more, I won't even talk about when it came about. So a great feature you also get with SharePoint is when you're using the $30 a month Microsoft 365 Copilot license. Now, I want to draw a distinction here. This is distinct from the Microsoft Copilot chat that everybody gets for free with Microsoft 365. I don't know if you know that, but you all get a free Microsoft Copilot chat with your 365 subscription. That has some limitations in terms of what it can do, and it can only work with its model and things it can pull in, from the web and stuff like that. If you add the $30 Microsoft 365 Copilot license, you get this AI-powered search and chat experience, and now it lets you bring this natural language world of chatting with your AI robot friend, and to just do so much more than you could do before. So when you use this slider at the top and you have that license and you scope it to work, all the chats that you do, it's now still private inside your tenant, but it can now see what's in SharePoint, what's in OneDrive, what's in your calendar, contacts, emails, things like that. It can only see from your perspective, like it says, "Hi, Jeremy," so it knows who I am, and it will only allow me to interact from a Copilot perspective with what I can see anyways. So it can't let me see something I don't have access to, but it will look at everything that I do have access to. So you could do things, you can prompt it, you can chat in there and have it look at your SharePoint files and say, hey, compare and contrast the proposals between these two files. Hey, can you rewrite this document and make it sound more professional and less verbose? Summarize the document for me. Create a proposal from. You could have a folder full of marketing material and say, create a proposal from. And it'll go and do its best to put something together. It'll probably get you pretty far. Um, you can have it look for new sales opportunities. I mean, anything you want to ask it, you can ask it. There's really no limit on what you can ask. What it pulls and how accurate it's going to be, is going to vary. But you could say, hey, look at all these proposal folder and look for new sales opportunities for me. It'll look at all your old proposals. You can say, look for old ones that are older than 60 days and, put together an email I can send to those clients to ask them about how that proposal, if they'd like to discuss it. How cool would that be, right? Create a marketing plan from, assess my risk. I mean, there's just so many more things you can do with it. And you can create what are called SharePoint agents. So this chat prompt I'm looking at right now is kind of generic. Whatever I type in, it's going to take that and use that for a prompt. You can create specialized SharePoint chat agents with inside your organization that are scoped to a specific task. Like you could have one that's a SharePoint agent set up for onboarding new people. And when they start and they say, hey, when you're onboarding, use this to help answer questions about what you've got. And the way that's designed in the back end is it'll only look at those documents. It'll know it's trying to be a helpful onboarding agent, understanding and I shouldn't say understanding, because that makes it sound like they really understand, but taking into context your vision, your mission, your values, and including that in its speaking to your new teammate. Yeah, you can do that with Copilot and with your SharePoint. So that could be worth the price for a lot of you, just saving time and having a better onboarding experience for your team. There's another feature of Microsoft. If you have Microsoft Business Premium, you have some limited features of some of this, and then they have some more advanced features if you need it, want it, have to have it for your own compliance features. But Microsoft has a data governance solution called Microsoft Purview. Data governance is kind of what it sounds like. You've got all this data. How is it governed? How is it managed? How is it organized? How is it uh, is it organized in such a way that it is minimizing loss prevention so that, you're not giving people access to files that have credit card information that they shouldn't have? Are there insider risk issues? Do you have to do any audit of the documents? Maybe you need to show what documents you've used and how they've changed and you need an audit functionality. So maybe you need to do e-discovery because you're a law firm or you've got an HR, some kind of legal issue. So there's a lot of different features. I'm not going into all of them right now because that would be like probably another 3 webinars, if not more. But just so you know this exists, keep in the back of your mind, hey, I do want to put things in the cloud, but I want to make sure that my team isn't using it the way I don't want it used, or is uh, you're concerned about, you're sharing things with clients because you're using the sharing feature and you need to audit that and know things are going on. So there's all kinds of use cases that could be out there. So just so you know that is available. So that's mostly SharePoint. That's mostly what you're going to get with SharePoint as far as some of the new features and all of that. Where OneDrive fits in, when you sign up and you have SharePoint and OneDrive, Um, OneDrive is your immediate document folder. It's kind of a special shared document folder. I'm sorry, a special document folder that isn't, it lives in SharePoint, but it's actually, all it is documents, and it's only for you by default. So any documents you put in your OneDrive by default are only for you. There is a folder, I think, by default that says to share with other people. If you put things in there, it'll share with other people. You can share things from your OneDrive to other people if you want, and you can access them from any device. So it's really handy. Um, you can, when you run it on your Windows desktop, your My Documents folder that's usually you people use usually your C drive, your My Documents folder, or your C drive, your desktop folder where people put a lot of things on their desktop. Those are what are called known folders in Microsoft's world, and you can actually have those automatically synchronize up to OneDrive for you. So you'll get a good backup of those documents. And then now, if you're sitting in line somewhere and someone's like, oh, can you send me that document? You're like, shoot, it's on my desktop at the office. Well, now you could actually pull out your phone and look at your desktop and see those documents and email it or edit it or do what you want with it. So that's what OneDrive is. Like I said, you can use it for sharing for inside your organization and all of that. It's just not quite as well designed for a lot of group sharing and group permissions and other things that are on there. It's a little more limited. So where should you save it? It's kind of up to you, but this is what we recommend. Use that SharePoint document library when it's going to be something that's part of a team or department or overall company-wide. And then use OneDrive when it's really just private for you. And OneDrive can get a little messy if you're starting to share it with everybody. So you want to kind of use it a little sparingly, and is our recommendation because it can get pretty unwieldy pretty quickly, and um, then people say, "Oh, I want this access to this file to other people," and yeah, it becomes kind of a challenge. So definitely better to use document libraries and SharePoint when you want to share to a group. But that's kind of what we think about it. So you can decide, what you want. So the OneDrive application, when you run it, it'll sit down in your tray. It's actually a confusing name. Uh, Microsoft and I could talk about some of their product names and branding and such. But so the OneDrive application is the same app that you use to synchronize files down to your computer or to look at them on your phone or tablet. It's the OneDrive app. In some cases, some of that's moving to like a Microsoft 365 Copilot app, but the OneDrive app is still out there. And there's apps for Windows and Mac and iOS and Android. And on Windows, it's going to sit down in your tray and it's going to synchronize if you have it enabled. So you can see, got OneDrive Contoso, which is my OneDrive that is the tenant Contoso. I've got OneDrive Personal because you can also have OneDrive Personal accounts. But above that, you get a slightly different icon, which just says Contoso, which is the name of the tenant in this example. So when you share things in OneDrive, remember I mentioned that sync button that was at the top of the SharePoint folder. When you sync it, it'll actually invoke OneDrive on your computer and sync that file down. So if you had a marketing folder under Contoso and then you clicked on it, you would see these. If I opened up the arrow here, you'd see these two things: leadership connection documents and Mark 8 project team documents that were shared and synced from OneDrive. So that's what that app is for if you want to do that. It's great for syncing things down. It's great for accessing files offline. It does have some limits if you have certain file sizes and lots of files. But by and large, for a lot of you that are trying to, sync a few thousand or, tens of thousands of files, it's going to work pretty fine for you. So that's OneDrive, the application. So what do you do from here? What do you do from here? If you're already using it, you've already got it set up, where do you want to go? If you haven't used it and you're thinking about moving to it or you want to test it out first, here's kind of a way to go forward. You guys will all get a copy of these slides. But first, who's going to help in this proof of concept team? You do want a champion for this. Like I said, people have a lot of muscle memory. People do not like change often, even if there are some benefits. sometimes the change is more of a burden than worth what the benefit in people's mind. So you want to get who's going to be the champion, who are the power users, who are the people that want to try this out, that might be willing to work with others and that. Um, and then talk about what's possible. You can say you can talk internally, you can invite us in, and we can talk about, how you can move documents and how you might want to organize it for security and things. Those become the goals and that security we put together because, like I said, now's the opportunity if you're going to move that. We do recommend change management, and that is in orange. Like, don't skimp on the effort to get your people prepped and ready for this big change. Because if you skimp on this, you will have pushback. You will get people to complain. You will have lots of people calling you or calling us because they can't find stuff. So you want to get people involved in it. Do them a solid and give them the grace of, hey, they're going to be having to learn something new that they've been using for, doing it the old way for 10, 20 or more years. Um, let's give them the grace of that. Have a test plan. How do you know it's operational when it's all done? Check out the out of the box experience. Most of the time, that's going to do what you want. We can help you with that, help you with the document migration. That can take some time depending on how many documents you've got and anything you might want to change up. We also recommend some basic orientation and training. This is another area. Please don't skimp on this. This is one reason people hate IT is because people skimp on their training budgets and orientation budgets because they know it takes time away from work and sometimes there's a cost to do the training. But I can guarantee the frustration around people not using it, grudgingly using it, the grumbling, the time they'll spend complaining, trying to figure stuff out will more than offset what you would have planned for them had you included this. I really believe that. And I believe that because we're getting close to celebrating 29 years in business. I think, is it today or tomorrow or the next day, I think is our anniversary. 29 years we've been doing IT projects, and these are reasons projects people don't like it because they didn't get the training or where they feel they can get full value. And then, give people the opportunity to troubleshoot what's going on, follow up questions, and then get that decision point. Is this what you really want to do? Or do you want to upgrade your server or look at a different sharing solution? There's others out there. There's lots of options, but to get you to the cloud. So here's kind of a rough plan, but I'd invite you, if this is something you're thinking about before we wrap up here, put something on the calendar to think about this, to give us a call, to talk about it internally, whatever your next action is, um, to adopt this, to enhance what you've got, however that's going to look. And that's it. So we got some time for Q&A. As Amanda said, you're going to get a survey. Please let us know how we did. Thank you, Amanda, for doing all of that and helping get all this organized. This is how you contact me directly if you want. If I even fully introduce myself. Hi, I'm Jeremy Cherney. I'm the president of Tobin Solutions. Um, and I'm delighted to be with you today. We had a little hiatus over the summer, and it's nice to be back and doing one of the things I love to do, which is the opportunity to educate people and give them options and recommendations so that they can have a better technology experience and run their businesses better. If you think this kind of conversation will be useful inside your organization as far as championing it and helping get it adopted, let us know. We're happy to do that. Or if you've got other organizations you're a part of and you think they could do this, I'm also available for speaking on that. If you've all been in any of our other webinars, we speak on cybersecurity and lots of other topics of Microsoft 365 and features, functions, and how to get the most of that. Talk about disaster recovery. Next month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so we'll be talking about cybersecurity, I believe. And that's it. So any questions from any of y'all? D. Frick. Hi, David. That's who I think you are. Thanks for being here. All right. It looks like we are about ready to wrap up here. I don't see any other questions. Wow, I finished on time today, Amanda, even with couple minutes to spare. So you all have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you back in October.